Thank you, Dr. Goswami, and thank you to NICE and Dr. Pramod Jaswal for inviting me here today. I actually just returned from a trip to Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And when I was in Nepal, I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Jaswal at his office. So it's really great to be here today and among such distinguished fellow panelists. Um, so I would like to talk about the partnerships and minilateral, multilateral groupings that the U.S. Is engaged in the Indo-Pacific, with this overall goal of bringing about a stable regional order. This, of course, involves enhancing deterrence, preventing conflict, maintaining free and open seaways, and protecting the sovereignty and independence of the regional nations. And I think the partnerships that the United States is building are catalyzing greater cooperation on all the issues that we've been hearing about: maritime security, creating new and resilient supply chains, uh, developing and deploying cutting edge technologies, and of course, protecting trade and energy flows. And so I think all of these interlocking partnerships that the U.S. has been fostering really build what I like to call a networked security architecture. So I would like to talk about what we're likely to see from a second Trump administration when it comes to the Indo-Pacific region. And to start off with, I would just I would encourage everybody to read the Indo-Pacific Strategic Framework, which was the document that drove the first Trump administration's policy toward the Indo-Pacific, and of course was released to the public in January 2021. And I will note there is a robust South Asia section in that strategy. So for starters, the Quad, I think, will remain a very important forum for engagement in this region. It, of course, was revived under Trump 1, and it's since become an effective multilateral mechanism to support the concepts that I just mentioned: sovereignty and independence of nations, free and open seaways, transparent lending and investment, broad-based economic development, and peaceful resolution of disputes. So it's not a military pact, but it really is about these powerful maritime democracies coming together with a shared vision of the region and pooling their resources and capabilities to realize that vision. And the Quad met for the fourth time in person during the Biden administration in September. And there were some very important announcements on maritime security cooperation. They talked about a maritime security training initiative, a maritime legal dialogue to uphold the rules-based maritime order. This is very important, as well as a Quad Coast Guard observer mission to improve interoperability and advance maritime security. So I think we can expect that these initiatives would be continued into the second Trump administration. Another initiative, multilateral initiative, that I see the Trump administration continuing from the Biden administration is the AUKUS initiative. And AUKUS is really about, and this, of course, is the Australia, UK, US initiative to provide Australia with nuclear-powered but conventionally armed submarines, and also with a Pillar 2 to develop advanced capabilities among three nations. But it really is about collective military deterrence. It's about burden sharing. It's about providing the closest allies of the United States access to advanced capabilities that they need to be able to contribute to maintaining a peaceful Indo-Pacific. So I think that, that initiative will certainly continue. It's already moving forward. It's part of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, enabling the transfer of technology for the AUKUS program. And I think, it's clear that the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, and the Secretary of State designate, Marco Rubio, both have shown in their congressional record that they will prioritize competition with China and everything that entails, whether it's greater investment in U.S. defense capabilities, more export controls on high technologies, restrictions on certain U.S. investments into China, efforts to develop alternative supply chains for critical minerals and technologies, or just clearly signaling that the U.S. will defend Taiwan and allies like the Philippines that have been subject to Chinese maritime aggression. So speaking of maritime realm, I think it's also important that we monitor what's happening in the Indian Ocean region. This is a very important region. India has traditionally been leading efforts to secure and stabilize this region. And we have seen efforts to try to control sea lines of communications in the South China Sea, and we don't want to see that kind of activity starting in the Indian Ocean region. And I think, we have to be cognizant of the so-called gray zone tactics, which involve intimidation, coercion, psychological warfare, disinformation, misinformation. And, we've seen it in the South China Sea in Chinese actions against the Philippines with, water cannons against maritime vessels and other bullying tactics, really. And so I think, the point is the Indian Ocean region, we certainly don't want to see that become a center of aggression or intimidation. And I think, this is something we just need to keep our eyes on as we move forward. So the last topic I will touch on is that of critical minerals. Certainly, critical minerals are foundational to the transition to renewable sources of energy. Minerals such as copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium, and rare earth elements are needed for clean energy technologies like wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles, etc. But certainly China controls 2/3 of the global supply of critical minerals and is responsible for about 80% of the global processing of things like copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and rare earth elements. And we have seen that China has started to exercise leverage over global mineral supplies, as demonstrated by its decision to control the export of gallium, germanium, and antimony. So this is certainly something that we need to think about in terms of resilient supply chains. And I think the establishment of the Mineral Security Partnership is a positive step, as well as the Quad announcement of a clean energy supply chain initiative. So all of these efforts can be very helpful, but I think the issue should be addressed with a greater sense of urgency. So in conclusion, certainly competing with China requires Washington to not only invest in its own technological and defense capabilities, but also to work closely with allies and partners to shape the environment of the Indo-Pacific. And U.S.-China competition need not lead to conflict. That's why it's so important to keep lines of communication and open dialogue so that the competition does not devolve into conflict. And I think Trump's invitation to President Xi to attend his inauguration, even though he didn't accept it, I think it still is a good sign that President-elect Trump understands the necessity of continuing this communication, keeping those lines of communication open, and continuing to pursue dialogue between the United States and China. So I'll just end it there. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.